Chapter 28. A Grim Duty. The fourth level, Dread's Keep. Crinan watched Zywayne take hold of one of the players by their collar and lift them up from the ground. The player squealed in fear as the elf, who only looked like a teenager, dragged him to a line of other players who were sitting on their knees with their heads lowered and hands bound behind them. Crinan had seen this before. He had participated in this before. This was an execution of prisoners of war. Black Knight did not take prisoners back to their base. They gathered what information they could on the battlegrounds, and then gave them a quick death. "On your knees, Govian," Zywayne ordered, pushing the player to the ground. "Line up. Keep it tight. You know I used to hate the idea of this back in real life. Father told me of occasions where he had to kill his prisoners. It sounded scary. It frightened me. But now, after all these decades enduring what your kind has done to me, and watching what you did to my sister, let's just say that I am fearless. You all deserve this, and I very much look forward to giving it to you." Zywayne produced a knife from his belt as he slowly walked behind the first player. The blue-haired fair player whimpered with fear and trembled, closing his eyes as he mumbled a prayer to Dura Ana. "She is not here." Zywayne leaned in and whispered as he clutched a handful of the fair's hair. He pulled back, eliciting a whimper from the prisoner. Zywayne stood up and looked down at his prisoner with a scowl. He appeared to be savoring the moment. It was as if he was imprinting it in his mind so he could look back on it. "Any last words, Govian?" Zywayne finally asked with a smooth, calm tone. "Please, don't do this." The fair started to beg, but was silenced as Zywayne swiped the blade across his throat. The fair's milky skin split apart, and blood gushed out in a torrent that sprayed the ground in front of him. Zywayne released the fair's hair, and he fell backward to the ground, kicking and hissing for a few moments before he lost consciousness. "To torture those who cannot fight back is true cowardice," Zywayne yelled as he pulled back on one of the horns of his next victim. "Deplorable, a mark of a truly weak being." He cut the throat of the demon player and then pushed him forward. "On this day, I am the reaper of the seeds you have sown. I am your end." He grabbed another head and pulled back. Crinan frowned at the monologuing. He shook his head and looked down at the bloody ground beneath him. To die in combat was one thing, but to be teased while knowing your death was unavoidable left a foul taste in his mouth. He didn't disagree that they should die, but he also recognized that a person deserved to hear their own thoughts as they passed. "You!" Zywayne shouted, nearly in a rage. He pointed the tip of his knife toward Crinan. "You look away. Why?" "You're drawing it out," Crinan replied. "You don't need to do that." "You disagree with my methods?" Zywayne asked, tilting his head in curiosity. "Then please, step forward and take over." "I didn't." He began to protest, but Zywayne shoved past the player kneeling in front of him and approached Crinan. "Take over, young knight." Crinan didn't like being challenged, and he didn't like being ordered around by someone who didn't even hold rank in the army. He glared into Zywayne's eyes, not breaking contact, and then shrugged. Stepping forward, he made his way behind the players and pulled out his pistol. "May you find peace," Crinan whispered as he raised the weapon to the back of the player's head. Without flinching, he pulled the trigger and took a step to his right. "May you find peace," Crinan repeated, firing again. He did this until he counted that his cylinder had run dry, and he drew his second revolver. When he was done, 12 bodies lay on the ground in front of him. Crinan took in a deep breath and walked over to Zywayne. "Congratulations, pretty kitty 69-69-420. You have advanced in rank. Previous rank, 18,282,922,222. New rank, 17,845,988,312. Previous percentile, 61%. New percentile, 59%. "No matter the life they lived," Crinan said, once again locking his eyes with Zywayne's. He quoted Captain Bran, leader of Sentry Squad. "They all deserve a word of comfort. The reaction to the responsibility of taking a life, no matter how evil, shows a person's true character." Crinan holstered his weapons, and his eyes wandered upward to the hole in the wall that the Centurions had originally charged through. There he saw Malinka standing. She was wordlessly looking down at him with an empathetic expression spread over her face. Their gazes met for a moment, and then Crinan looked away. "We don't torture people. Someone finish the job," Crinan barked out, "and show a little fucking respect." He turned from Zywayne and saw the members of Sentry Squad giving him approving looks. They had all heard Captain Brand speak on the responsibility of killing in their lives, and to hear the words again was both sentimental and comforting. "Zion, son!" The booming voice of Vasily passed through the opening in the walls and into the courtyard. "Enemy reinforcements! They come!" "How many?" Zywayne yelled. He gave Crinan one last glance before turning and marching toward Vasily. "Many!" Commander Vasily replied, finally appearing next to his granddaughter. "Thousands!" "By the brothers!" Zywayne spat. He took a moment to cradle his chin in his hand as he thought. As they waited, the rest of the army hurried in through the hole. The infantry archers and catapult crew scrambled in, joining Sentry Squad. The last people in were Commanders Emilio and Tau, and they hurried up to Zywayne and Vasily.
"We've disabled the catapults,"
Commander Tau, a platinum-haired vampiress who perished 10 years prior to Crinan's death, reported.
"The players will not be using them against us."
"My archers are taking position on the walls. Commander Vasily, dispatch your shield-bearers to the breach," Commander Emilio quickly said, and then turned to Crinan. "Jameson, you have the most important mission of us all. You must enter the keep, face the challenges inside, and get to the 5th level." He reached out, grabbed Crinan's upper arm, and took a step closer. "There is no time for us to discuss it. We are all counting on you, son. We will be at your back. We will hold those that wish to stop you at bay. I know you are not the most cheery of people, but if ever you had a reason to truly trust anyone, let it be now." "In there?" Crinan looked up at the glistening black stone castle before him. It stood tall and foreboding, a simple rectangular keep that jutted jarringly out of the ground. Crinan stared up at it. He didn't like its ominous look, and based on what he had been told thus far about its lord, he wasn't eager to see what was inside. "I have faith in you, my friend," Emilio encouraged. He reached down and took hold of Crinan's hands, squeezing them with his own trembling fingers. "Your mother and your father took X-grain for us. Strong blood flows through you. You are a Centurion, which means you are among the best. And," Emilio nodded his head past Crinan, "you are not going alone." Crinan glanced back to see Ander, Malinka, and Dolly standing behind him. He looked them over and turned back toward Emilio. "And us," a voice called out from Crinan's right. He looked over as his former knight, Sir Edmund, approached alongside Malinka's brother and former knight, Sir Dimian, each sporting a kite shield and sword. "We'll do what we can to get you where you need to go, Jameson." Crinan reluctantly nodded at the two knights, and Emilio spoke. "Then you will go with the blessing of us all. May you find the way to end this, Crinan Jameson, and may the brothers protect you from harm."
500 yards!
Commander Tau shouted.
"Emilio, we need you!"
At that, Emilio gave Crinan a thin smile and hurried to the stairs that led up to the wall. "No time to tell us not to come," Dimian declared as he and Edmund hurried to the front of the group. Their heavy armor clanked as they jogged and led Crinan and the rest to the main entrance of Dread's Keep. "We're doing this for you, Crinan and Malinka." "Everyone!" Jeff Skaven bellowed as Crinan ran past. "Lay your eyes on the one who will free us from this place!" Jeff whooped and smiled as he nodded at Crinan. "A whelp in life and a true demon in death! Cordial tune, Crinan Jameson!"
"Cordial tune!"
The other Black Knights shouted as one. They stomped their feet on the ground and then pounded their chests with a single fist, ending their send-off with a grunt. Crinan paused, and his lower lip trembled at the sight. He had never been the recipient of a cordial tune in his life, for it was a blessing that was highly revered and rarely used in Black Knight. Crinan turned toward everyone, grateful and fearful of the faith and honor that was bestowed upon him. and tried to look them all in the eyes. Crinan stared at the black knights before him and felt his eyes rim with tears at the sight. His heart pounded and his hands trembled. Everything was becoming more and more real for him by the moment. The stakes were getting higher and higher. Coming into contact with people he cared about made him realize how important his mission was, how important he was. These were all lives he could save, souls he could renew, and he refused to let them down.
"Cordial Tune!" Crinan yelled. To all of you!
He didn't want to cheapen the honor, but he knew every person before him was more than deserving of having the words spoken to them. They needed it after years, decades, and some even a century of being nothing more than meat to torture or fuck. They needed to be empowered. They needed to feel like the mighty warriors they had spent their lives being. The Black Knights raised their weapons high into the air and cheered for the one whom they entrusted their fates unto.
"Let's go,"
Sir Edmund said, ushering everyone forward.
"There's nothing more for us out here. To the doors. Hurry."
The group ran as the battle began. Arrows rained down from the sky, planting deep into the ground all around them. Edmund and Demian raised their shields above their heads, while Andor and Dolly summoned ethereal shields to protect the rest. The way up was harrowing. Hundreds of steps needed to be climbed, and multiple times Crinan looked back as he watched the Black Knights fight on. He saw some fall, he saw some triumph, and when he had climbed enough steps, he looked out over the walls and his heart sank. There were indeed thousands of players converging on the hole they had broken in the walls of Dread's Keep. He watched ladders go up on the walls. He watched the players funnel through the single breach. Crinan knew that this was not a battle that Black Knight, no matter how much heart they had, could win. He wasn't sure whether it was because they truly believed in him or because they had nothing to lose, but the idea that the few hundred Black Knights would stand and fight to keep him alive shook him. Who in their right mind would willingly lay down their lives and sacrifice for the hope that a person that many of them had never even met before would save them? What small group would stand against many times their numbers at impossible odds because their faith outweighs their reasoning? Crinan shook his head as he stared down at the beginning of the battle that would surely kill them all. He imagined them all dead, all those who came before him, and for a moment he hesitated.
"Crinan," Andor called out, running to his side. "Why do you tarry? We must go."
"It's all in vain," Crinan snorted. He watched one of the Black Knight archers fall and felt a numbness in his body.
"Look at them all."
Crinan gestured toward the players at the walls.
"There are just too many."
"And they will all come for you, Crinan," Andor said grimly. "No matter what, they will come for you. They will not simply lay down and give up, not when there is an enemy to direct their fear toward."
"Fear?" Crinan asked, crinkling his brow.
"Oh, yes,"
Andor said softly.
"While they dwell within fantastical bodies, adorn themselves with illustrious armors, and wield weapons they never could even lift on Duran, while they give off the image of power, they are but mortals, and they are trapped. They are weak, they are afraid, and they are desperate. They, as does every prisoner here, fear that they will never leave this place. They believe if they fight, they can hold on to their mortality. This fight has become just as real to them as it has to you."
They have all been backed into a corner,
Saracen added through Dolly.
Govia is losing control. The citizens cannot go back home. They cannot escape all this. Govia has locked down the hells to combat the efforts of Saginius Lynx. While the dead still pour in, nobody is allowed out.
"Then how will we get out?" Crinan asked. "If they've locked it all down."
Trust Saginius,
Dolly said with a thin smile.
I have seen his plan, and I am relatively certain it will work.
It will,
Malinka added, stepping forward.
It has to. All this can't be for nothing. Have faith, Crinan.
"Faith," Crinan repeated, slowly shaking his head.
"Faith in what?"
"Faith in me," the voice of Sage replied. I should say, Crinan, it is nigh time you start trusting someone other than yourself.
How can I? Crinan asked. I can't even see your face. I have no idea what you're doing. I have no idea what I am doing.
That is what faith is,
Sage said softly.
A knowledge that there is something you cannot do but need done, and the trust that someone or something other than yourself will achieve it for you.
Faith, Crinan said again, slowly lowering his head. It sounds like people who need faith just need to get stronger. You can't just trust everyone like that. Everyone has their own interests in mind, and they only help you when it serves them in the long run.
A weaker person would be offended by that,
Sage said, maintaining a kind tone.
But I understand your feelings and do not pass judgment upon you for feeling the way you do. Maybe there is even some truth to your words. Maybe I do have something to gain from saving you.
And what is that? Crinan asked. He watched a fireball explode against a group of archers below, saw the bodies flying backward from the blast.
That is for me to know,
Sage replied.
For now, have faith that I truly want my goals to come to reality, and for that to manifest, I need you to be alive.
Oh, fucking great, Crinan sighed.
Enter Dread's Keep,
Sage instructed.
Find Thornscale and complete whatever it is he requires to open the portal to the 5th level. Your journey is halfway complete, Crinan. There is no sense in doubting yourself, or me now.
At that, Sage went silent, and Crinan turned to the others. He looked at them, all 5 of them, and nodded. Are we gonna do this or what? He grumbled. He pushed against the gigantic arched door in front of him, stepped inside, and then he vanished.